Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Right, so infamous Iron Man deep dives out there, and as always we're going to be breaking it all down. How does he appear, my honest opinion, and basically kind of like his ability overview. Right, so first things first, before we go anywhere else, he does look very good. There are a ton of similarities with Doctor Doom, but there are quite interesting twists and turns. Few things that I definitely did not like, and kind of like, in my opinion, quite excessive limitations on him as well. But that might be just to kind of like rein his power in, because he definitely does seem like he has a solid rotation for shorter, for longer fights. He did come across like as a practical champion that is going to be likely quite popular and impressive addition to the contest. So, when infamous Iron Man would land a critical hit, he instead inflicts an instant shock, dealing energy damage equal to the damage of the critical would have dealt. Obviously, some people love these things, some people not so much, but it is something to keep in mind whenever you do go up against a shock immune opponent, although there seemingly will be a way to get around that with one of his synergies. If an opponent would gain 2 or more promise effect at once, promise are converted into a single indefinite energy vulnerability debuff that reduces their energy resistance by 942. Each subsequent debuff is 10% less potent. Again, this is one of those things where I think it wouldn't have hurt to leave him alone, but they had to make less potent for each subsequent debuff. So basically, when you apply 10 of these, then, you know, it's hardly going to matter in longer fights. But still, that should provide quite a meaningful increase to his damage in how many matchups? I think you can trigger it against Bishop, you can trigger it against Storm, against Storm Pyramid X. Can you trigger it against Sauron? Don't think so. Can you trigger it against Toad? Don't think so. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to think of against how many champions you can actually trigger this against now. You see, initially when we saw that he converts prowess into energy vulnerability, it seemed way more OP. Now that they have put on that restriction of 2 or more at the same time, that narrows down on how many champions this ability is going to work drastically. But nonetheless, against Bishop, against Storm Pyramid X, it's a nice thing. By the way, yeah, guys, if you know more champions is going to work, leave me in comment section, because otherwise I'm going to be thinking it for a while. But here we can see it in action, where you do need to have those, and then you can stack the vulnerabilities. One of the cool things are that his armor buff does count as an active armor buff. It's not an armor passive, because it was a bit tricky to notice, because the icon does look different. And his immunities are tied to his armor up, just like Silver Centurion. Whilst he has his armor up active, he's immune to Incinerate and Shock, which is a very good set of immunities to have. And whenever he would be inflicted with an armor break, then it goes on cooldown for 12 seconds and reapplies itself. However, if he's still suffering from armor break, and you of course can nullify it still, but if you do it via an armor break, he basically can't start that timer, or the timer is paused while an armor break is active. So I do think in a way he's going to be somewhat easier to counter, and more of his abilities are being switched off if you do armor break him, like OG Doom's, for instance, was. And it's kind of ironic, because OG Doom was armor break immune as well. So armor break is going to be a massive weakness. And he is unable to enter his aura as well if he doesn't have his armor up. So yeah, any armor break champion is going to work very, very, very well against Dr. Doom. So now we have the Aura of Iron. And again, many similarities with Aura of Hazaroth. Some abilities exactly the same, some of them are different. Number 1, Aura of Iron can trigger while infamous Iron Man does not have his personal armor buff, and its duration is reduced by 4 seconds for each unique non-prowess buff on opponent above 2. So it's kind of like Warlock's infection. So for instance, like Venom and Angela and Odin and a handful of other cosmic champions will be able to work really well against this aura even without having access to armor break, even though most of those champions have armor breaks anyways. But here we are. Then aura is paused during both champions' special attacks, while pause this way landing a medium attack ends aura early. Now that's actually quite a big downside in my opinion, because that means that after a special attack you can't rush in to punish it. Or at the very least, you know, you need to kind of tank the special attack very close by and need to be able to reach the opponent with a light or a heavy, but typically we always dash away and then dash in with a medium. So I do think this will be kind of like a noticeably annoying ability. Luckily though, this condition does not affect special 3 aura. So special 3 aura will last like 24 seconds, I believe, so it's a very meaningful amount of time, and you can use your mediums after opponent's specials. Also, Infamous Iron Man special attacks are passively unblockable. Yeah, that is perfectly fine, nothing wrong with that. Similar, well, the same as Doom's Aura of Hazareth. And each time he inflicts one of his personal shocks, it is immediately replaced by an instant energy power burn that burns a percentage of opponent's current power based on the potency of the replaced shock. Deals 670 energy damage to the opponent percentage of max power burned. So power burn is going to be one of the bigger sources of damage for Dr. Doom, because he doesn't have access to critical hits, he doesn't have access to like massive fury buffs or many other attack modifiers outside of level 2. We're going to get to it. But again, that's one of those conditional things where we are kind of seeing more and more champions immune or resistant to power burn, so he will inherently have quite a few bad matchups, I would say. By the looks of it, he definitely does seem to have more bad matchups than OG Dr. Doom does. Also, Infamous Iron Man's passively unstoppable and stun immune on the last hits of special 1, 2, and a heavy attack, just like Dr. Doom is. So you don't want to use specials or heavies whilst he has his aura active. And additionally, unlike Dr. Doom, he doesn't have the damage cap of like 1% or whatever it is on Dr. Doom. Instead, if he takes more than 5% damage, then he gains a regen buff from these attacks on the last hits of specials or heavies. So again, it's kind of like Dr. Doom, but quite a few of those things do seem to be more circumstantial, I would say. But he still obviously has his heavy stun, and he inflicts shock as well on his medium attacks as well as on critical hits. So doesn't that mean he still has that guaranteed rotation of, you know, you're doing medium triple lights into heavy attack, or if you are going to be finishing combo with medium triple light medium, when opponent is at 3 bars of power, you are guaranteed to power burn them whilst you have Aura of Iron active. So he will have extremely potent power control as well, which is quite awesome and very, very good to have, without doubt. And moving on to a few other things here. Here's that regen showcased. So special 1 is basically same thing as Dr. Doom's special 1 initially, when you enter in Aura of Iron for 8 seconds. And then if you already had your Aura active, and it's quite easy to do so because you can just chain your special attack from your heavy attack. It was then opponent is passively special locked for the remainder of the duration of that aura, which, you know, special lock is kind of neat. It's quite annoying to fight against. Offensively, I don't feel we have kind of learned how to take the biggest benefit of the special lock, but perhaps this is going to be the champion that kind of unlocks it. Also, special attack 2. After the first hit of this attack lands, Infamous Iron Man gains X amount of attack rating for each of the opponent filled bars of power for the remainder of the attack. Each beam hit inflicts a shock debuff, dealing 4000 energy damage over 5 seconds. Keep in mind, if your aura is active, then instead of shock debuffs, this is going to be a massive power burn that's going to power burn a ton of opponent's power and deal a ton of damage. Special 3 activates the aura for 24 seconds, and this aura cannot be ended early when you strike opponent with a medium. And then the second effect, which is kind of the quirkiest bit here, is If you already have Aura active, which is again quite easy to do by just charging heavy attack while opponent has shock, because that activates Aura for 2.6 seconds for each stack of shock that you consume. And basically, you give yourself 100% energized buff, and you also give it to opponent, which is kind of really trolly, considering that as Dr. Doom, you want opponent to have more power for your power burns to do more damage and be more effective. So I do like the flavor of that ability. It's also kind of obviously seemingly, you know, somewhat dangerous to give opponent 100% increased energize. But in case of Dr. Doom, it should be perfectly safe, again, considering that he has his guaranteed power drains. And then looking at some other quirks here, you can see obviously that his special attacks will be unblockable, which is going to be neat. His shock immunity and his incinerate immunity are obviously going to come in handy at times. I didn't quite see how potent the armor up buff was, but it did seem like this character also is going to be quite tanky, hopefully. And Sig ability does make him even tankier as well. Here we can see after the special 3, where both champions have those energized buffs active. And here is the Sig ability itself. Once per fight, when Infamous Iron Man's health drops below 15%, he gains a regeneration buff, healing up 35% of his maximum health over 10 seconds. And then if you have maxed out recovery, so you can recover a decent chunk of health. This is obviously kind of homage to Iron Man's Sig ability. Also, while this is active, the opponent is passively special locked. Passively special locking opponent for 10 seconds isn't, you know, irrelevant. Can definitely be very, very useful. And also, while Aura of Iron is active, the opponent suffers minus 100% flat reduced unblockable ability accuracy. I think this is actually a huge thing. I think because of this, he will be able to deal with unblockable matchups extremely well, because you're going to be able to switch off unblockables for like vast majority of the fights. And I do think this is going to be kind of like a very big deal in his kit. And it also looks like it's not necessarily based on the level of Sig, so it does seem like just having him awakened already will give you quite a big benefit. And then while his personal armor buff is active, Infamous Iron Man gains extra 1000 block proficiency and energy resistance, which again makes him tankier in virtually every aspect. So that is quite cool. So here we can see some numbers where he power burns for like 17k on hit, and obviously there are quite a few hits in that special attack. He did seem to have relatively decent amount of damage. He didn't come across like as an absolute damage powerhouse. He's not going to be Hercules or CGR by the looks of it, I think. But he definitely has quite a lot of utility, and his damage looked, at the very least, you know, good, decent, presentable. It's just a fact that you need to be able to inflict that damage. So you need champions or that are not immune to power control, power burn specifically, or you need to make sure that those nodes are not there. You ideally need champions, obviously, that are not immune to shock, because that will basically cripple his entire kit. So there will be more instances, I think, where you don't really want to use this guy. It's kind of like one of those things with Guardian specifically as well. I do have a rank 3 Sig 200 Guardian, and I really like the champion, but I often end up randomly bringing in Guardian in the fight and realizing that he kind of sucks for that fight, because either opponent has, you know, very significant energy resistance, or I've overlooked some impact on armor, for instance, the fact that you do not crit and it's all based on shock. It just kind of like lays a different set of rules for the fight, so you do need to be aware of that. But I do think he's going to be a very good champion. And now let's go over synergies. Now, first and foremost, the one that he has with himself is against villains. While fighting villains, gains 600 critical damage rating for each knocked out team member. And let's be honest, this is much shittier version of the original Dr. Doom synergy, where he gained extra attack for each knocked out team member against everybody. So, you know, this is definitely not as good if you put them head by head, but it's still a nice synergy to have, because you never know whenever. And, you know, it's not like it costs you anything to have access to. But it does seem to be kind of like watered down OG Doom synergy. Speaking of OG Doom synergy, this one I do quite like. Hero champions have plus 8% attack rating. So, you know, why not? And then robot champions have 20% ability accuracy increase. I'm kind of just thinking which of the robots need that increased ability accuracy, because the best I remember, most robot abilities are kind of guaranteed. None of them are RNG ability dependent, I'd say. I mean, it's always nice to have about 100% ability accuracy, but it's not like we have Visions, we have Nebula, we have Omega Sentinel, Nimrod, Sentinel, Darkhawk. I don't think any of those champions really have any abilities where they have, percentage-based triggers. So I'm not entirely sure how useful this is going to be for robot champions. Something to kind of like think about. How many abilities would this actually matter to? But let's move on. The Iron Man synergy, unfortunately, is extremely underwhelming. I was really hoping for like a better and more solid synergy with Iron Man Fintiwur, but it really isn't. The synergy is just, yeah, okay, they get stronger and bigger armor ups. Fine, cool. Unfortunately, nothing special is happening there. But these synergies, though, with Fantastic Four members, with the guys from Fantastic Four specifically, are all, in my opinion, very, very good. So first, Infamous Iron Man gains 4,900 critical rating while opponent has 2 or more bars of power. That's a lot of extra critical rating. And given that you are running a champion that can special lock and prevent opponents from throwing special attacks and then power burn, and that's how you do your damage, this seems like a very impressive synergy. Also, Thing, when rock stacks are removed, Thing gains extra Fury passive. This will just double his ramp-up speed, which is quite nice. Human Torch, chance to incinerate when struck is increased by a flat 100%. This doesn't really matter too much. It's, the idea is don't get hit. And if you have enough smolders, you still have that 100% chance, basically. And Mr. Fantastic, imprison the opponent's solid start of the fight. Basically, Mr. Fantastic turns into a Mephisto for 15 seconds, which, again, can be very, very useful, I think, in my opinion. This synergy kind of... if Doctor Strange would be in decent standing right now, would be OP. But let's first get the first part. Infamous Iron Man. Cowardice effects on opponents are 50% more potent. Kind of whatever. Okay. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice, but it's nothing super special. With Doctor Strange, heavy attacks refresh all existing blessings, and all effects of Special 1 are increased by a flat 100% for each active blessing. So it means up to 300%, which basically means that throwing level 1 can get you immediately to a level 3. And having all blessings active at any given time obviously means that Doctor Strange will be healing on every single hit. He will have like perfect parries, and he will be powers. Well, he will have the fury and damage and things like that. And from what I saw in that clip, it definitely looked quite impressive. I'm very curious to see how it's going to work out for Doctor Strange. I unfortunately do think that he needs more help than this. But by the looks of it, this is the most powerful synergy Doctor Strange has, because it definitely kind of improved him significantly. The only problem is that Doctor Strange is so far behind at the moment that I don't think that significant is going to be enough. But this synergy is absolutely lovely. Synergy champions. Whenever one of either champion's personal shocks or incinerates is prevented by immunity, they inflict a corresponding incinerate or shock respectively. These incinerates still count as shocks for the purposes of Infamous Iron Man's abilities. Sweet. This means that Penny Parker can do damage much better now in Incinerate immune matchups, because she'll just inflict shock. And this means that Infamous Iron Man can actually function against shock immune matchups and just, use Incinerate as the power burn mechanic and everything else. This is very important synergy that will enable him to do a ton of fights that he otherwise couldn't or wouldn't. And then we have the last one, which actually I like a lot. Whenever Infamous Iron Man is immune to an effect, he deals the opponent a burst of energy damage equal to 200% of his attack rating. Each time subsequently this ability triggers, its potency is reduced by 20%. Again, it's kind of like a shame it gets reduced, because I do think if it didn't, it could be kind of like somewhat cheesy. But in this case, I kind of get it, I guess. I don't think this is a must-have synergy, though. However, Mephisto's soul imprisonment's duration is doubled. I can easily see this synergy meaning quite a lot, because that was one of the problems with Mephisto, where if you wanted to access the soul imprisonment utility, it kind of flushed away your ramp up, your safety net, and in many cases your damage. But with this setup, soul imprisonment lasting like 30 seconds before it needs to be refreshed, I think he just kind of gained quite a bit more range, in my opinion, and I love that. As somebody who has rank 4 Mephisto, I think it's very, very cool. Right, that's about it. So my opinion about this Doom, he's definitely filled with abilities. He looked very impressive. He definitely seems like a champion that, again, will not necessarily be usable as many fights as OG Dr. Doom, though. He definitely has his ups and things that he does better than OG Dr. Doom. And he definitely has, obviously, some weaknesses and limitations comparatively to Dr. Doom. However, obviously, even if he stands relatively close and does not surpass OG Doom, that alone is going to mean that he's an amazing, amazing champion. There's a reason why Dr. Doom is such an iconic character in game. And I do think he has maybe the potential to stand on equal ground, even though I don't think this champion is going to be remotely as scary when you face this guy, because you can easily nullify his armor up and then he's quite useless. You can armor break him and then he's quite useless. And yeah, I do think this is going to be easier to fight against Doom, so to speak. Offensively speaking, I do think he definitely has the power to rival OG Doom, at the very least, from the very limited amount of information I have seen so far. Let me know what you guys think, however, and what do you guys think of this video? Drop a comment, and I'll catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the